I think our practice has been to take a motion to go out of executive
Yes,
session.
I think you asked for it though, right?
You go either way. But at this point, we conclude the discussion, so we can have a motion to leave executive session, and I will make the record. On the public. So moved.
Moved by Commissioner Chavez. Is there a second?
Second.
Second, Commissioner Clark. It's called vote. Commissioner Clark,
Aye.
Commissioner Heath,
Aye.
Mr. Chavez, and the chair votes yes as well. That passes 4-0.
So now I'm going to start the webinar, which will allow the public to come in as we do our transition.
Ed, would you like your little placard over there? Oh, you're moving?
We're recording. We've got attendees and we are ready to proceed.
Good morning, this is Assistant Attorney General Ed Hamrick, and I represent the State Board of Land Commissioners. This morning, the board has been in executive session to discuss two matters that were noticed for executive session, in particular, ecosystem services production lease 114741 in Morgan County, and an ecosystem services production lease 114743 in Weld County. These matters were authorized for executive session under 246402(3)(a)(1) of the Colorado Revised Statutes. The discussion was limited to matters authorized for executive session, and no decisions were reached in executive session. The board is now come out of executive session and is ready to proceed with the rest of its meeting agenda. Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning. We did have an executive session as referenced by Assistant Attorney General Hamrick. And before that, we met with county commissioners from Jackson County, where we are currently located in Walden, Colorado. And it's been a terrific day yesterday, touring various properties owned by the State Land Board, and really appreciate the hospitality that we have received while we've been here. With that, we're going to move on to our first order of business. I want to open up the lines, as it were, for public comment related to non-agenda items. For commissioners, I believe you received from Kristen last night. We did have one email comment sent in from John Weir, which will be entered into the record. And Nick, if you can let me know if there's any public comment on the line for us.
Members of the public, on your end, you have the ability to use a feature called raise hand. If you'd like to make a comment on something that's not part of our agenda this morning, now's the time to do that. So use your raise hand feature and we'll see you here in the room. Commissioner, I've got Linda Hodges with the hand raised. And before we proceed, I just want to acknowledge Mr. Lewis. We saw that you intended to make a comment regarding the staff report, which is an agenda item, but we don't generally take comments on information items. So this would be a good opportunity for you to make your comments as well. So if you use the raise hand feature, if you can hear us.
That's super helpful. Okay.
So I'm going to promote Linda Hodges to a panelist, and that will allow addressing the meeting. Just give it 2 minutes.
Just let me know.
Ms. Hodges, you're on and you're in control of your camera and mic on your end.
Welcome, Ms. Hodges. Can you see us and hear us? Okay, you're on mute, but we can see you.
Okay, how's this?
Perfect, thank you.
Great, thank you. My name is Linda Hodges. I am the conservation chair of an organization called Aiken Audubon, which is located in Colorado Springs. Some of you are familiar with me from past meetings regarding Chico Basin Ranch. And I did want to remind the group that Aiken Audubon is still interested in pursuing a layered lease on Chico Basin Ranch. I have been told that your RFPs are planning to go out this fall. Is that correct?
Yes, we have a yes.
Okay, and do you know how soon that might be?
No.
I ask because it's my understanding that the layered lease conditions need to be in place and included in the RFP, so that we would have to get that ironed out ahead of time. Is that accurate?
Well, Ms. Hodges, it's Greg Okish. I think we talked a month ago and you and I agreed I would call you next month and we'd start the conversation. So I don't
Yeah.
think anything's changed.
Okay, thanks. I just, our board is looking for more information and timelines. But I will give you a call and we can talk more about it then. Okay. Thank you for that. And there's some great sage grouse in the Walden area you might want to go take a look at.
Thank you. Thank you,
Thanks.
Ms. Hodges. We appreciate your time this morning. And would Mr. Lewis like to have a moment with us?
Promoting the panelists, and it'll probably take a second here. Mr. Lewis, when you're ready, you're in control of your mic and camera.
Good morning.
Morning, welcome.
I really don't have a public comment here. I was hoping to comment on the topics that I selected. So I will just listen. And if I have any comments or questions, I'll send an email after the fact. I appreciate your time.
Okay,
Sir.
thank you. All right, with that, we have no public in the room with us, so I think we can close the public comment period. Do we have no public? We have a public. We have a public.
Good morning, everybody. My apologies, I slept in this morning, but I'm Rich Trino from Grand County, I'm County Commissioner. And thank you for the invite, and I don't know much about this organization at all, so I'm looking forward to just sort of learning and getting to know you all, and yeah.
Thank you.
you for having us.
Welcome, Commissioner. Appreciate you being here. All right, with that, we will close the public comment. Yes, Madam
Chair, how do we acknowledge that we have received the comment from Mr. Weir? And,
I did that at the very beginning.
okay,
Yes.
but no, I guess how we're going to respond to his question isn't, and there was an earlier one about the fire mitigation.
Yeah, I'm not, I skimmed the current comment. I'm not sure there was a question in there.
I received one earlier about that there had been a staff question regarding whether fire mitigation would be permitted up around the.
I believe we addressed that in last month's staff report.
Okay, all right.
Okay. And we did enter Mr. Weir's comment into the record,
All right.
so we do have that. Any other questions or comments before we move on? Okay, thank you. All right, we are going to turn it over to Director Ryan for announcements.
Two announcements this month, Commissioners. First, as I said earlier, Commissioner Braden has resigned from our board. And I'm working with the Governor's Office of Boards and Commissions to find a replacement to fill out the rest of his term. Second, our liaison to DNR for the past 4 or 5 years has been Doug Vilsack. Doug was recently got a job offer to be the state head for BLM for Colorado.
It's very exciting for us to have him in that position. We do a lot of interface with BLM. But we're sad to lose him from DNR, and we'll miss his insights and advocacy for our agency and our mission. So wanted to let you know that Doug is not going to be on our call today, I don't think. He'd be calling in from vacation. And he starts his new job on Monday. And in the interim, Vanessa Mazzal will give the DNR director's report, but I think I may have just teed her up there, so. But those are the two announcements, big staffing items.
Terrific.
Vanessa's having a little bit of internet trouble. And I think I'm just gonna let her, is it all right if I have her participate by phone?
Sure.
Of course.
I'm gonna call her.
No, I don't. Yes.
I actually got you on speaker in the room if you want to just do it by phone.
Oh, I'm in. Hi, everybody.
Well,
But can we put her by a microphone?
Is that the wow?
yeah, let's do that. Thanks. We just need a minute.
While we do that, let me just welcome the Grand County Commissioner and say that earlier we heard some questions from the commissioners who were present. And if you have anything that you want to say to us in terms of particular needs in Graham County or questions, at some point, I hope we can provide for that. Right here. Thank you.
Vanessa's back.
It's dicey, but I'll move through swiftly, everyone.
Thanks. Welcome.
Thank you, everyone. My name is Vanessa Mazzal, and I'm a policy advisor in the Department of Natural Resources, here to provide the Department of Natural Resources update. I will start off by just letting you know that the DNR's WIGs, our wildly important goals, are being finalized. And I think, as we've mentioned before, you can expect a continued focus on sustainable funding for parks and wildlife, balancing conservation and recreation, and the completion and implementation of the water plan, which just was out for public comment as of last month. Executive Director's Office announcements. The big one, I think, is that our former colleague, Doug Vilsack, was appointed to become the BLM State Director, the Bureau of Land Management State Director, and he'll be moving into that role on Monday. For an interim period, Alice Cosgrove Horgan, who is our Legislative Director, will be serving as Assistant Director for Lands, Parks, and Wildlife, and we will expect to fill her legislative director position, I think later this year before the legislative session starts. And she will be in an acting capacity, and then I think will be transitioning as she is going to be going on maternity leave. The Executive Director's Office is going to be hiring for a new Assistant Director for Energy, and also for a tribal liaison position that were funded approved last year in the budget. And finally, the Wildland Fire Mitigation and Management Commission. I wanted to also acknowledge that we heard a little chatter earlier around wildland fire, and I just wanted to let you know, in case Doug didn't get a chance to do so last year, that Dan Gibbs was appointed to the Federal Wildland Fire Mitigation and Management Commission, which was a very selective process. And it's a partnership between the Departments of Agriculture and Interior and Homeland Security. Our state legislative priorities are still under development, although the big news is that the Colorado Forest Health Council did unanimously vote to advance 5 legislative concepts to the Wildfire Matters Review Committee. And those were presented earlier this week. And I think we will also have a continued emphasis on other forest health and water related, drought related initiatives among quite a few others. In terms of water related updates, as I mentioned, the water plan was out for public comment. The draft water plan, we're scheduled to finalize that plan by around the late 2022 or early 2023 at the latest. It acknowledges sort of some of the strategies that we are thinking about and putting forth in terms of addressing significant water shortages, in particular on the industrial and municipal front. The Oil and Gas Conservation Commission was awarded $25 million as an initial sort of startup fund for getting its oil and gas orphan well oil and gas program off the ground. They've had an existing orphan well program, but this expands it significantly and also allows for OGCC to partner with the federal government on federal oil orphan well cleanup and reclamation. CPW updates, the Colorado Parks and Wildlife Division updates. We've now funded 10 outdoor regional partnerships covering 27 counties and 46% of the land area of the state through the Outdoor Regional Partnerships Grant Program. And the most recent awards cycle just were announced last week. Also, there was a very exciting ribbon cutting last week or 2 weeks ago with the Department of Transportation and also in partnership with the Southern Ute Tribe on a wildlife crossing structure, very high priority wildlife crossing structure on the stretch of Highway 160 between Pagosa Springs and Durango. And this is the completion, it's the completion of a $12 million project that includes wildlife fencing, an overpass and an underpass that are expected to reduce wildlife vehicle collisions by 80%. On severance tax collection updates, this one was just flagged. Our preliminary July 2022 severance tax collections were the 3rd highest July on record at about 22.2 million, and the highest since 2004. Federal legislation, I think folks are probably aware that the Senate passed the Inflation Reduction Act through the federal reconciliation process, and it will be taken up by the House tomorrow. This is a significant step toward advancing the Biden administration's energy, climate, environmental justice, and healthcare priorities and tax agenda. The bill will include, if it passes, the act includes significant investments in drought mitigation, water efficiency, forest restoration, fuels reduction, agricultural and private forestry conservation, and a number of other programs that are expected to benefit DNR and DNR's programs or indirectly benefit our partners in the state. And also, I think we've been tracking the Recovering America's Wildlife Act bill. I think we've talked about that a little bit. This is a significant investment in the state wildlife action plan. That bill, we're hoping that it will get a floor vote in the Senate in mid-September when Congress comes back from their August recess. A couple of federal planning announcements that are a bit dry but important. The first one is that the BLM has initiated its scoping period for a Gunnison sage grouse range-wide management resource management plan amendment. This includes several, I think 7 counties in the southwest part of the state, and it will be to protect the federally listed threatened Gunnison sage grouse. And then also greater sage grouse up in the northwest where y'all are. The BLM is also undertaking a revision to its RMPA process as well, and we're not quite sure when they're going to kick that back off. Scoping closed in February, but we do understand that draft environmental analysis will be getting underway soon. And finally, there's a new process which is pretty exciting and very unique and a pioneering process. The BLM announced a statewide resource management plan amendment to address big game habitat connectivity and priority habitat throughout the state. It's the first sort of statewide initiative of its kind, and so a little bit of an experiment, but this is to align the BLM's policies with state policy in terms of protecting high priority habitat for game species. And with that, I will make myself available for questions if you have any.
Thank you, Vanessa. Any questions? Commissioners? We're glad you got Zoom working.
Yeah, I really apologize for the technical difficulties. This is just adding insult to injury that I couldn't be there with you guys in person.
No worries, we made it work.
All right,
All right,
thanks so
thank-
much, Commissioner. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much. All right, we're going to move on to the staff report that you'll find in your packet with Director Ryan.
It's tab 4 in your packet. We highlighted a number of things we've done over the past month. Maybe it's best for me to just ask if there are questions on that. Were any of you disappointed you didn't get to go on the underground mine tour? Any other, anything else about that? That's probably the easiest thing for me to do.
Okay,
Thanks.
thank you so much. All right, we are moving on. We do have Chris Smith with us to talk about tab 5, utility scale solar energy leasing update.
Good morning, Commissioners.
You know how to use Alt Tab on the keyboard? No.
That's all tab.
Yeah.
I think I can figure it out.
If you'll do share screen and then go share your. It's a wonky mouse. Yep. That. And then more and go hide the meeting, floating meeting controls.
What did you say?
Hide floating meeting controls. And that'll go away in a second.
Yeah, I'm good to go. All right, good morning, Commissioners. I'm Christopher Smith, the Real Estate Section Manager with the Colorado State Land Board. And the purpose of this information item today is to provide the Commissioners with an update of the effectiveness of the renewable energy leasing policy. This is a policy that the Commissioners adopted a year ago, July, and at that time, I committed to coming back to the board a year later to give an update on how it's working. So I'll do that at this time. Also, I'll use this time to describe the steps that staff has taken in the past year to better understand the long-term impact of utility scale solar on soil, plants, and other natural values. And I'll use this time to describe the modifications to some of the communication tools that we use to communicate with our lessees. So about 5 to 10% of all renewable energy produced in Colorado is produced on state trust land. This is enough to power about 166,000 homes here in Colorado, and it supports both the board's strategic plan goals as well as the governor's goal of being 100% renewable by 2040. So I'll start with some definitions. The board has different types of solar on our land. The first type is rooftop solar. So this is also known as distributed generation solar. We have our building in Louisville, which is about 80,000 square feet, is powered by solar panels. We also have several solar gardens. These are smaller than solar farms, as the name would imply. These are about 50 acres or less and 5 megawatts of power or less. And the board has about 20 of these on its parcels, mostly in kind of urban infill locations near a grid. And then lastly, this is a solar farm, or what we call utility scale solar. This is typically about 320 acres or more and about 20 megawatts or more. The board currently has one of these that is under construction right now under its parcel. This is the Thunderwolf project in Pueblo County that NextEra is building and will be selling the power to Xcel Energy. So as a reminder for the board, but also really for any public that may be listening, we have a two-step process when we lease land for renewable energy. A developer will come in and apply for a planning lease. This gives them 2 to 3 years to do any research on the land that they need to make sure it's viable. That research could include changing zoning and finding a utility to take the power, things like that. No production occurs during the planning lease. And then should they find that, that the land is viable for solar or wind development, they would come in and apply for a production lease. These are typically longer term, 20 to 40 years. This is when construction occurs and when production begins. So a little bit of history on renewable energy on state trust land. The board has been leasing land for renewable energy since the late 1990s. We really only had a few wind turbines here or there on our land. It wasn't a concerted effort. We didn't have a renewable energy leasing manager. We were more reactive. And then really starting about 2015 or so is when we started making a much more concerted effort to pursue renewable energy. That's when solar started becoming more prevalent as well. Currently, the board has about 100,000 acres under lease. 97% of this is under lease for wind. 3% or so is under lease for solar. And so the board last year generated $2.8 million in revenue from this. Director Ryan, looks like you have a question.
I was thinking you had those backwards. 97% of the 100,000 acres is wind.
Is wind.
Oh,
Yeah, so we currently have about under 3,000 acres under lease for solar. 2,500 of that is the Thunderwolf project that's currently under construction. And then these 20 solar gardens that are, for us, they're roughly about 15 acres or so. So we probably have.
I'm sorry, of the wind, what's the footprint? Is 5 acres?
Yeah, yeah, exactly. It's as you can imagine, we lease a 640 and it may have 3 turbines on it, so very spread out. Yes, that's correct. Yeah. So last year we made $2.8 million in revenue from this, and we have 300 megawatts of production on our land currently of installed capacity. When Thunderwolf goes online next year, that revenue is going to jump to by $900,000, so we'll be closer to the $4 million range, and the installed capacity will jump to about 500 megawatts. This is a growing line of business for us. We're seeing more and more demand for this. So in June, Assistant Director Okish described layered leasing to you all in detail. So I won't go into detail on what that is, but in general, we put multiple leases on our lands. With solar, however, this is a monogamous use. And that's kind of the heart of today's discussion. Solar plays an increasingly important role in us achieving our strategic goals. But as a result of that, we're finding that because it's a monogamous use, we're having to remove the historic use of grazing in order to pursue solar. So we've identified, and our agricultural lessees have really identified 2 potential downsides to solar. One is the monogamous use and the fact that they'll get displaced. But 2 is that we don't fully understand the impacts of solar on soils and wildlife and other natural values and things like that. So we are taking steps to address these. And some of those steps I'll describe here. So last year, we revised our policy framework. This was when the board adopted the new updated policy in June of last year. So really what this did was so let me back up. This is the new policy is exhibit 3 in your packet if you all are interested in that. But in short, we added language to limit staff's authority on approving planning leases to only those state trust lands that meet certain criteria. And these criteria include, they exclude cropland, they exclude land that's in the stewardship trust, and then they include lands that have solar resources. They include lands that are near a grid, so near a substation or a switch yard or a power line, something like that. And then lands that have average annual forage production of 1,250 pounds per acre per year. So these are the less productive lands. So we've sort of honed in on that and put those criteria in our policy. Second, and this is one that I'm really proud of, is we've prepared a white paper. This is also an exhibit in your packet. I believe it's exhibit 4 in your packet. This white paper documents the agency's understanding of the long-term impact of solar on soils, plants, other natural values. this was a lot of work, and we learned quite a bit during this process. Third is we've revised our communication tools with our lessees. Namely, this is a letter that we send to our agricultural lessees when we get an application from a solar lessee to locate on that same land or a portion of their land. That's also an exhibit in your packet, but the change was really trying to start a dialogue and a conversation with them to try to understand what their concerns are. This worked well for us during the Thunderwolf project. We found that the lessee was worried about their water infrastructure, and so the solar lessee was able to, at their cost, move that water infrastructure, and that sort of solved that problem with the agricultural lessees.
Chris, can I go back to the white paper for a minute? Are you going to spend any more time on that?
I'll go back to it a little bit.
Okay, I'll wait then.
And then finally, staff launched an initiative to establish range monitoring stations on state trust land that are leased for solar. And we did this in order to better understand kind of the before and after of solar installation. These will be long-term projects, and we're working to identify capable partners such as universities or conservation organizations that have the expertise to undertake such long-term scientific studies. So with the changes in the policy, we wanted to see if those changes have negatively affected this line of business, if we're getting less applications. So we went back and we looked, and in the last 12 months, we've received 14 planning lease applications. That's pretty much in line with prior years, so we don't believe it's had a negative effect. 5 of these were denied by staff, 4 were approved by staff, and 5 were referred to the board, and all of those were approved by the board. These are located sort of in different clusters throughout the state, which I thought was interesting. The red were areas that staff denied. This whole area here is the Republican River Basin, which is some of the most fertile lands in this. Oh, sorry. Where this is some of the most fertile land in Colorado. So the forage there was higher than our 1250 pounds per acre per year. So staff denied those. The yellow are ones that staff approved, and then the blue are ones that the board approved. And so you can kind of see these are clustered in the El Paso County and Pueblo area. This is the Moffett County one that we approved earlier this year and we toured earlier this year. So I thought it was interesting to see where these fell. So what's next? There's a couple things that are next for us. We believe we have a couple more potential policy revisions that we would bring back to the board at a later date. One of these is just sort of clarifying the authority between the authority that the board delegates to staff. Right now, the language could be tightened up a little bit. The second is additional citing to kind of hone in and give both the agricultural lessees as well as the solar lessees a better idea of where we would approve planning leases or production leases for solar. And then the third one is the vegetation, quantitative versus qualitative. Cheatgrass is different than blue grama grass. And right now we're using NRCS data, mapping data to look at the forage, and our district managers do go on the ground and see if, how productive it is, but we're recognizing that there's different quality of grasses. So to include that.
I would say a couple of things about that. This is Greg Okish, Assistant Director. First of all, field staff kind of came forward with that after looking at a number of the applications that you saw on that map and suggested that we really rethink, how much versus what, or consider both. The other thing they've mentioned that, Chris, I don't think you mentioned, but we're going to look at is they've suggested that it may be short-sighted to just summarily dismiss all cropland, that some land that is currently used for dryland crops actually might be very suitable for solar, and it might be a reasonable way to get some lands, almost like CRP, taken out of production, put into a higher and better use, and have the grasslands restored over time. So we haven't looked at it very hard yet, but it is something we want to look at and get back to you on.
And so another next step is to proceed with the rangeland monitoring protocols with other conservation organizations or universities. And that was laid out in our white paper that's an exhibit. And speaking of the white paper starts at a high level with the agency's mission and then starts to get really detailed from there. But the conclusion of it is, in part, is that Colorado has abundant solar energy resources. And like most large-scale infrastructure projects, we expect that ground-mounted solar will have an impact on the environment, and that we should be studying that impact. But also that the agency has a fiduciary duty, and that these solar projects make 100 times the rent that an agricultural lease would make. So in general, we would make somewhere around $500 per acre, as opposed to say $5 per acre. So so we should both meet our fiduciary duty and our stewardship duty in this.
So thank you for doing the white paper. I thought it was very helpful, and I'm guessing there are other entities that would really like to have access to it.
Well, that's what I was going to touch on earlier. It's a living document, and we've shared it since we distributed it to you with TNC and others. We got some very good comments from TNC, including some additional in our literature search, including some additional suggestions for things to look at. So we continue to update it, and we continue to share it with people and get feedback, which I think has been terrific. The second thing I was going to say, and it related to Chris's point just now about, yes, these earn significant revenue for the trust, but I think channeling on his behalf, Commissioner Braden, he would also say that the long-term environmental benefit of reducing carbon emissions and things also has to be considered, not just the impact to the sites these projects are built on. So I think speaking for staff, we really feel like it is recognizing that it comes with significant impacts to individual users. It is something that we need to continue to pursue thoughtfully and for a variety of reasons.
Will we continue to monitor on our own projects to enhance that? So yeah, I see you both shaking your heads.
We will. That's our intention. Our staff has started. Our staff with NRCS. We have a couple of our field staff that are really interested in taking on that project. As Chris mentioned, I think if we're going to be really successful, we need to find a partner or partners who are more scientifically inclined. And we can look at the quality of the rangeland and the grasses and talk to you or anybody about that. We're not capable or don't have the expertise to understand the science behind at certain levels behind the soils in the long term. So I think we will continue to look for partners. I think it's likely CSU or somebody, as Chris mentioned, might be interested in helping us. Could be a great long-term grad school sort of project.
It'd be really interesting, and I think nationally, even as people get more information about it.
There's certainly a lot of data out there. I think I have something in my backpack on like our land, and we look at that regularly. It's mapping how the contours, the type of soils. A lot of that work was done, as everybody knows, 100 years ago, probably from the explorers putting stakes out, and it's accurate, unbelievably accurate. I'll share one later. I'll share it with you. It's just the data's there, and we're actually reworking all of our land mapping and layers on, again, types of soil and looking at, again, quality, quantity, inputs, that kind of stuff. So, yeah.
And I think it's interesting. I said TNC shared a lot of additional literature work with us. It's still what they shared was still primarily focused in other places where there's a longer history with solar. That doesn't mean some of it's not applicable here, but I do think the opportunity in Colorado is that this is a fairly unique ecosystem. It's a fairly new use, and we have an opportunity to understand our own lands more specifically.
So in summary, renewable energy leasing is really an important line of business, or has become an important line of business for the state land board. It contributes to the state's goals, the state land board's strategic goals, and our mission of making money. Unfortunately, we recognize that this is not compatible with the historic use of grazing. And we also recognize that we have a small number of ranching families that are impacted by this. It's not our entire ranching community, but it is a small number of families. So we do recognize that. And the board's efforts to improve its policies and communication tools will not lessen that impact, but we hope it represents a good faith effort to respond to those challenges. So this is an information item only. We're not asking the board to vote on this at this time, but we are interested in understanding your questions, comments, concerns.
In the white paper, and I'm sorry, I'm not referencing where, but I think we as policymakers need to look at how much do we want to consider community impact? Because we certainly heard from surrounding farmers what it does to change the character of the community, not just of the land.
Certainly true, and a lot of the ranch, as you all know, I mean, they're doing it themselves. If they have an opportunity to put solar on their land, they're not going to pass it up. Some of these ranchers. So, anyway, my question was: have you certainly contemporary with the passage of the whatever inflation bill, which has hundreds of billions for solar and renewable? Have you more phone calls in the last couple of days, or what are your thoughts?
David on that one.
Yeah, it's been really busy the last 6 months or so.
Yeah.
I have to feel that I was memorized. My phone calls. But yeah, lots of them.
Jackson County just now, when you hear them thinking about it, I don't know if we should have some kind of packet or something that could help them consider, particularly now with the new legislation about what's available and timing.
Just following on David's comments, I think it's interesting if we can start to marry up some, interests with communities that really would like to see solar potentially come to their county.
All the new, and you guys have mapped out the new transmission lines, where they're going and where our lands, you touch those. Yeah. Fantastic.
Yeah.
Thank you. All right, we have one more business item or information item. Let's see, we're down to Wilbur. Request for review of an ag lease that he will walk us through. Welcome, Wilbur. How long did it take you to drive over here?
About 5 hours.
Last night, yeah.
It was a pretty drive. It was a little different than what you're used to seeing because it's the fire went through pretty.
Yeah.
So
Some of our commissioners said that.
but it was still nice.
Welcome, we're glad you're here.
Morning, Commissioners. Wilbur Strickert, Northeast District Manager. And we here today to talk about a request for review for Ag Lease 114656. I just want to give a few introductions. We have on the Zoom, we have our two people here that are here with us today. It's Trevor Fletcher. He is here to talk about it. He's the one that we asked the board the lease to. Then we have Mr. Rick Court, and he is online, and he's our lessee that requested this review. And then I have William and Rachel on there as well. So if Nick wants to promote those at any time.
Neither of your guests are on, as far as I can tell. What were the names again?
Mr. Rick Court and Mr. Trevor Fletcher. But anyways, we'll do a summary of a staff decision here. We have a little background, a bit of evaluations and recommendation, and then we'll hear from Mr. Court and Mr. Fletcher. So this lease is located in Yuma County. It's kind of right over here. It's kind of in this this corner here, next to Washington County, and then Phillips County we have right up in here. A little closer view here. This lease is a 640. As you can tell, it is dryland farm ground. Got Highway 59 right here, and then Gulf County line, Washington and Yuma County line is right here. So if you go south on 59 here, you get to the town of Yuma, and then if you went north on this, you'd end up to the town of Haxton. So this particular lease was advertised to the public for offers, and that was just our typical process. It was advertised on the website. It was posted in the courthouse, and then there's posted in my office as well. Mr. Fletcher found this lease on there, and he submitted a bid for the $21,000. In that process, we notified our lessee that he received a competitive bid. And with that notification, that told him that he had lost certain 118 rights, and we call those their right to match. And that was due to the 5 delinquency agreements that he had.
Can you speak up, please? I can't hear you.
Really? I felt like I was screaming.
HVAC is putting a ton of noise in the room, and you're not hearing very
I'm
clear.
sorry, I felt like I was yelling. So anyways, Mr. Korf submitted a bid for $17,000 is what he came back with for his offer on the lease.
I just have a quick, when his payments were late, you referenced there, was he notified then or just recently that he lost his rights? 118
He
rights.
was notified with a delinquency notice, and it states on each one, it kind of says that they violated their lease, and I have those, and I was gonna pass them out in just a
Lease, I would start with the lease clearly says that a late
Yeah, no, I'm aware of that.
is a violation. And then, as Wilbur said, we have the, we can hand them out. We have the delinquency notices that were sent out to him.
So like what you were asking there, and we go back to the lease, paragraph 2E, it states that the lessee has to pay the board in advance each year, and that, I mean, we underline that there, it's in advance of their anniversary date, they are supposed to pay us. Mr. Court failed to do that, and that's why he's in violation of his lease. And he did that 5 times, and there was 2 times when there was a demand for payment that was sent. And so how that works is, so we send them a notice out, and it goes out about 30 days before their anniversary date is when their notice goes out of their bill, when they're supposed to pay. If they don't pay by their anniversary date, about another 30 days goes by approximately, and that's when the delinquency notice gets mailed to them. And then if they do not pay the delinquency notice, they have 30 days to do so. Then that's when the demand for payment happens. And then that's mailed out, and I believe it's 30 days they have for that. And then it's, we have to post the property for eviction at that point. So we got all the way with Mr. Korf twice to the demand for payment portion of this. So CRS 118 tells us that we are supposed to lease to our current lessee unless one of the 3 things happens, and that's the board and lessee fail to agree on terms, the lessee does not wish to renew, or the lessee has failed to comply with any provision of the lease. And this one falls into the 3rd one, where they have failed to comply with the lease because they were late on payments 5 times. So I wanted to kind of just take you through the process that staff goes through when we get a situation like this. And it's every competitive bid, it doesn't matter if it's a new lease or what. When it happens, if they don't have the right to match, or if it's a new lease, it goes through the same process. So we look at 3 different things. We look at the revenue, which is 40% of the total score. We look at the stewardship, which is the other 40%. And then the last, we look at the stability of the local agriculture community, which is the last 20%. And each staff just goes through that process on the score sheet, which was, you guys have the score sheets attached in your packets, and we score those individually. And then, you know, with the persons that's there, and then total those up to see who gets awarded the lease. So when staff went through that process, Mr. Fletcher submitted the highest financial bid, so he came out on top in that particular category. And he also, and Mr. Fletcher also came out higher in the stewardship score, so the three of us went through that. Mr. Korf was awarded a higher score in the stability to the local agriculture community by all three of us when we went through that. And then, so in total, when all of us got done with those three sections, came out that Mr. Fletcher scored the highest score for all three of us. And so that's kind of how we recommended that he would get the least. So based on this information that I provided you with the board, staff recommends that the board uphold the staff decision and award the lease to Trevor Fletcher. And there is one thing that I did want to point out to you guys. In your board packets on that recommendation portion, we had an error in our lease number there. There was, instead of it being 114656, it had an 8 between the 5 and the 6. And we just wanted to make sure that we are talking about this lease number 114656. So if there's any confusion to anybody on that part there.
That's the right number.
This is the correct number. And then I wanted to make sure you guys had the delinquency notices. Wanted to make sure you guys had those, so those could be included in your packets. And I'm sorry, Commissioner Clark, I will hand one to Bill for you. So are there any questions or me before we move on to hear from our lessee if they arrive?
This is Commissioner Scanlon, because I'm in reviewing the request for review for Mr. Korf. You're addressing the issue around no information was provided. In your documentation of this is what your view is counter to that perspective?
I believe what he's really talking about is he wanted to be able to match the bid. And so we didn't provide him a dollar amount.
Oh, I see. I was ahead of you.
Because of that 118 and losing that portion, we didn't tell him the dollar amount that.
Because he had lost those rights. I am now following you. Thanks, I got confused with his request.
Yes. This is Commissioner Clark. To that same point, when we provide the notice that about Section 118 rights not being there, is it clearly laid out what that means? Those rights that are taken away?
Right.
On the notice that we sent him, when he got the competitive bid, it stated that he lost the 118 rights, and then it tells what the violation was. And then it tells him because of this, he lost his ability to match or know the amount is what it says. But it doesn't say that on the delinquency, only of that.
Not, Commissioner Clark, this is Assistant Director Okish, and maybe if I understand your question a little differently. After consulting years ago and on occasion since then, after consultation with the AG's office, we decided it was not appropriate for us to try to notify somebody of a lease violation and the consequences at the time it happens, unless we're taking action at that time, that it was adequate to simply notify them of the fact that they had lost certain rights under statute 118 at the time their lease is up for renewal. So if your question is, did we notify them at the time the lease payments are late? The answer is no. And that is not intentionally not the way we chose to manage the process.
That's helpful. Thank you.
It is in our lease though, that language.
That language is in the lease. The lease language is clear. It's just a matter of, do we take responsibility for sending them a letter at the time the violation happens?
I got it. Commissioner Keith?
I appreciate that there was legal advice about that, but I think our intent is these are partners. And I'm wondering why we might not just include that again. I think the first time you get it, if you saw you were going to lose your 118 rights, it would be a significant wake-up call. And with all due regard to the Attorney General's office, I think it's
I would offer, we've been operating this way for years, but if this board, I don't think it's the subject of the discussion today. If this board would like to revisit the practice in consultation with the AG's office, we can schedule that discussion.
I request that.
And this is Commissioner Scanlon. I think it's a push-pull of you expect your lessees to know their lease. Especially, it sounds like this has been around for a long time. So I get the notification being a little kick. But on the other hand, there is a responsibility as a lessee to understand the terms of your lease. So I think it goes both ways.
Are they online? These two gentlemen, sorry, are they online?
Looks like Mr. Korf has joined us successfully.
Are we ready to hear from Mr. Corp?
So Mr. Korf is our lessee on this property right now. So Mr. Korf, can you hear us?
So I've just promoted him to panelist, and it takes a minute for it to cycle through. And here he is. He's reconnecting. Mr. Korf, you're in control of your mic and camera on your end. If you'd like to join us by video, you can.
Hello, I'm Rick Korf. I guess I'm here in regards to my appeal to maintain my crop lease. I didn't really have anything presented or prepared to present. I was just wanting to be available for questions and that you may have from me. I assume you got my appeal.
Thank you, we did.
Commissioner Clark, you've got your hand up.
I do, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Korf, for your time today. And from reading through the materials, I certainly recognize that this property has been really important to you and to your family for a very long time. And we're certainly sensitive to that. With that being said, we have to really look at this from a procedural standpoint as well. And so I'm just curious as to, I'd like to hear from you directly kind of what your understanding was of why you were not able to see the competing bid, and also to just understand perhaps, you know, we're looking here at five notices provided to you. I believe that's the right number. Staff can correct me if I'm misquoting. 5 delinquency notices with respect to your lease and 2 specific demands for late payments. So just wanted to give you an opportunity to speak to why that might have been.
The 5 notices or my understanding of the lease or of the competitive bid process?
It's both. So yeah, I mean, did you received all of the notices? Did you understand what, you know, kind of why that was happening, those delinquencies?
Well, I understand that I was late on my payment for a couple of years. And it's all, for me, it's come down to harvest, you know, getting my harvest in and using my harvest revenues to cover my lease payment. For the last 2 or 3 years, I've not had an operating line of credit. So I've been just trying to survive on the harvest revenues. And when you plant dryland corn, then the harvest revenue is a little bit late sometimes, and as far as when my lease payment was due. Currently, I've got a line of credit now for my operating costs going forward, and so I don't anticipate the same problem going forward. But last 2 or 3 years, I've not been in that same position. So
When you were in that position, were you communicating with staff at that point about those matters, or?
I had several interactions with the people at the Sterling office. And I don't know what they documented as far as those communications, but I know I visited with, I think, an administrative assistant or something a couple of times at the Sterling office.
Thank you for that. I'll turn things to my colleagues. I just wanted to hear a bit. Thank you for providing a little more context from your perspective on what was going on through these years.
Yeah.
Any other questions for Mr. Clark? I don't see any from commissioners. Thank you for joining us online today.
Thank you.
Wilbur, any further comment?
I don't have any other comments. I do. So I would just remind the board that upon review by 3 staff members, there's a consensus that one of the bids is financially superior. One of the bids is superior from a stewardship standpoint, and setting aside for today, at least, the issue of whether or not our process is appropriate. I think that the decision that you're making is based on the staff review of 2 competitive bids, one being superior to the other.
Any discussion with commissioners? All right, thank you, Wilbur. We appreciate briefing given us.
Commissioner Clark,
Yeah, are we like deliberating now about our decision? Or do the other questions?
Did Mr. Trevor Fletcher show?
did not.
All right, Wilbur, so is this a decision item that I missed? Do we have a?
Yes.
Thank you. I couldn't find it in my packet. So yes, Commissioner Clark, thank you. We do have a decision item in front of us. I wasn't sure if it's now or a final action item, but it's now. So with that, our staff is asking for the decision from us to uphold the staff's decision to award the lease to a Mr. Trevor Fletcher. And you can review your board order, which Director Ryan very helpfully found for me. But we would need a motion.
So if I can just, this is Commissioner Clark, if I can just note that my thinking on this is that I appreciate Assistant Director Okish, what you're saying about the staff recommendation here in terms of the actual looking at the bids because this is a request for review. I am focused on process there, but I think that is appropriate in terms of what we're being asked of Mr. Korf is to confirm that this was done appropriately. And that's in this case, I think that this is a clear-cut case that that notice was provided, that the process was conducted in the way it's supposed to be. It is unfortunate that this situation has occurred. But with that being said, it's very much, we provided the requisite notices. Mr. Korf, you did have an opportunity to help correct those things. And this is something where our contracts have to mean something. So with that being said, I'd be happy to offer a motion that we approve or that, excuse me, how do we word this? I'll just read it. After consideration of the materials presented and testimony given at its regular meeting of August 11th, 2022, the board determines that it is in the best interest of the trust to uphold the staff decision to award Ag Lease 114656 to Trevor Fletcher. The board delegates authority to the director to take appropriate action consistent with the board's decision.
Thank you. We have a motion from Commissioner Clark. Is there a second?
Commissioner Chavez, I'll second.
Mr. Chavez is our second. I'll call a vote. Commissioner Clark,
Aye.
Commissioner Heath,
Aye.
Commissioner Chavez,
Yes.
and the chair votes yes, that motion passes 4-0. Thank you. Commissioners, what I'd like to do is allow us a few minutes break so we can have an opportunity to introduce ourselves to Commissioner Lincoln. Oh, I got you messed up where I looked at the commissioner list. So why don't we take a break for about 10 minutes so we can have a chance to meet with our guests, and we'll come back and continue on to final action items. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that's clear.
Production leases and we have planning leases. Which is exciting. This project, the South Platte Wetland Mitigation Bank Ecosystem Service Lease 114741 will generate the opportunity to earn $3.2 million for revenue for the State Land Board, and at the same time restore 70 acres of degraded wetland along the South Platte River. I'll be presenting today too some information, background on the report, as well as some of the lease terms. In moving to a production lease, this project has moved to a point where federal regulatory approval of the project is not necessarily imminent, but coming up. And it's also a time when the board will consider placement of a conservation easement. This project is located in western Morgan County. The regional location shows that this map shows this orchard property on which the South Platte Wetland Mitigation Bank will be located. It's approximately 20 miles from Fort Morgan. Fort Morgan is 20 miles to the southeast, and the city of Greeley is about 40 miles to the northwest. This location, this property map shows how the mitigation bank is located on the property. The lease has involved a 640 acre tract under agricultural and recreational use. Now that with the mitigation bank moving into production lease phase, what we know is that the bank will involve only 200 acres located along this South Platte River floodplain on the north of section 16. This lease action also will involve approval of a road access permit from public access through the rest of our property onto our site. This is to guarantee long-term with the lessee the ability to construct the project and manage it. During the planning lease phase, we normally lease the entire section. We don't know what the bank will involve, but at this point, we will be, we are certain that it will just involve these 200 acres. Just some highlights about this lease. The project size will be about 200 acres, will be 200 acres along the South Platte River floodplain. That will involve the restoration of 70 acres of wetlands. It will involve the removal of those 200 acres from the agricultural grazing lease. That's about 18% of our current grazing lessees leased land. There will be no change to the recreation lease, which brings in an annual rent of $6,000 per year. The project will generate 104.4 credits of wetland credits. That will involve the 70 acres of wetlands restored, but some additional buffer lands. And the estimated revenue is, wait for it, 3.2 million acres. That will involve the revenue to the state land board. And that will be about, when the project is completed, about $16,000 per acre. I'll be going over the site conditions now. This is from the north end of the property looking westward. You can see that there's a large bluff. The South Platte River is just off screen to our right. So we're looking west. And so the project will involve the 70 acres of wetlands down on the stream. There'll be also, this bluff area is included as a buffer to the project. And while it won't generate a significant number of credits, credits will be awarded also based on the buffer, but at a lower rate. Okay. I have a short video clip that was taken a couple of years ago. We're down on the floodplain. We'll be doing a circle around the BCs for the site. Oops. Please. Yeah, and you can hear the crickets. So we're looking at saltgrass. The grazing lessee has said that he doesn't actually, the cows don't spend a lot of time down here, and they don't prefer this kind of grass necessarily. The project will involve, I'll be showing you a project concept map of how the wetland bank will be developed, but will involve removal of some of the invasive species. In this photograph, you can see some of the Russian olive trees. We're now looking at the bluff. Again, part of this bluff will be part of the buffer to the wetland bank. There already are some existing wetlands on this site. Our property boundary is along this line of trees, and we'll be panning back to the north to look at, again, more of the direct riparian area with that's wooded with the Russian olive trees. Here is a project map. This video that I took was just down in this kind of western part of the project. As you can see, there are some existing wetlands that are shown in this bright green color. And you can clearly see the South Platte River flows from west to east across the property, sorry. The actual stream area will be just included as preservation. Some credits are given for that as well, but this will only be a wetland bank and not a stream mitigation bank. And then you can see the buffer area along that involves some of the cliffs. So this is only this area on the property will be involved in the mitigation bank or the ecosystem services production lease. This road here, the road access permit follows an existing two-track trip through our property to allow for other uses. The enhancement plan will involve grading the soil surface to restore and reconnect wetland hydrology. Over the course of years, floods have deposited additional sands and gravel on the property. We're going to be grading that to restore and reconnect the existing wetlands. That will remove some of those large sand deposits. It will also remove invasive species, both trees and low vegetation and grasses. It will remove unrestricted livestock grazing for the period of the mitigation bank. And after the mitigation bank is closing, livestock grazing will be allowed under an approved grazing management plan. But the days of it having just our grazing lessee deciding how that will be grazed will be over. It'll just be done on a prescriptive basis. The bank sponsor will also plant salt tolerant native species and reestablish the diversity of the native woody vegetation along the floodplain. The bank is located in this map depicts kind of the northeastern part of Colorado. You have the Denver metro area here on the lower left-hand corner. This dark blue line is the Middle South Platte Cherry Creek watershed. The way that mitigation bank credits can be sold, they can't be sold anywhere in the state. They can only be sold within a restrictive area, which is called the service area, to offset negative impacts elsewhere within the same watershed. So the mitigation bank credits can be sold within the South Platte, Middle South Platte Cherry Creek watershed. That's the area that we've agreed to not develop a competing bank with our lessee for that. Credits can also be sold as defined by this lighter green line as well, but the people that are looking to buy credits would prefer to buy just within the bank they have. They actually have to pay more for the credits if they're located there. And then our lessee, Sandy Creek or SCP Conservation, also has two other wetland or stream mitigation banks within the same Huckgate watershed. And so they've very much established a foothold for selling wetland credits within this area with us. We don't have a similar agreement with any other bank sponsors within this Huckgate watershed. The lease terms are a $5,000 annual ground rent. That will actually start upon approval of the bank by the Army Corps of Engineers. Our policy provides a $3,000 annual rent until that time happens. We expect that happen on this lease probably within the next 12 months. The state land board will receive a 20% share of gross credit sales from the sale of the wetland credits. The advanced minimum distribution is our way of recapturing the value of our conservation easement. We've set that for this property at $100,000 with an annual payment of $10,000 per year, starting in the 4th year after the Army Corps approval. Based on this value and what we expect credit sales to occur, we don't actually think that this clause will be triggered, but it's there as a safety net to minimize our risk increase in the event that no credit sales occur. This ecosystem services production lease involves a 15-year primary lease term. If credits do not sell out within that 15-year period, the lessee can come back and we actually need to extend our lease so that we'll generate that we'll see that revenue from later credit sales. We also will involve that 15-year road access permit that gives him access to that bank site. We are providing that at no charge. And then I just explained that the non-compete area will be the Middle South Platte, Cherry Creek, Huckgate watershed. Are there any questions about any of these terms or the bank in general?
I just, in reading the conservation easement, and it'll be held by Colorado Open Lands. So after the 15 years, the lease is over, will they be sending us a bill to manage that?
That's a great question. The conservation easement will actually go on after Army Corps approval. So they'll actually hold the easement upon approval of the bank. They'll be monitoring that from day one.
Right.
And the mitigation bank sponsor, our lessee, actually sets up a separate agreement where they will fund that annual monitoring. So that happens directly between our lessee and Colorado Open Lands. There'll also be a separate endowment agreement to fund an endowment for the long-term site management. That will be held by probably like a different party.
So who holds those endowments?
That's a great question. The Colorado Open Lands will hold its own endowment for monitoring the conservation easement. We're working to identify and develop a relationship with the endowment holder. If we had thought it would be Colorado Open Lands, we're going to be working with a different endowment holder that works just with mitigation banks. And that'll be a tax-free account, so it'll generate a higher annual amount of monies. We expect on this project, I think it's about $5,000 a year. Once the bank closes, we'll start receiving those endowment funds for the long-term site management. So I'll close with the staff recommendation is that the board approve ecosystem services lease ES 114741 and the accompanying road access permit RAP 114740 with the SCP Conservation LLC. And I do have a report on it.
This time. Any questions, comments for Mindy from the commissioners?
Is the first mitigation bank that we did took years and years and years. Partly, I think that was us, partly the developer. A lot of it was the Army Corps was really difficult in the turnover. And is this beginning to happen any more rapidly? How long has this planning lease been in effect, I guess?
That's a great question. This planning lease has been in effect under 2 years.
So this is remarkably fast.
This is remarkable fast, and it's what we're beginning to see now, because that learning curve involved the regulatory agencies within the state of Colorado, members of the interagency review team, but yeah, these are happening much faster.
Great. That's good news.
Okay. Commissioner Heath?
Commissioner Heath, I think the information in our packet is different than what's on the screen.
Of the board order?
Right, am I? looking at-
There's two.
Oh, no, a second portion that goes. There's a portion right after, up there that talks about the conservation and Army Corps of Engineers. Well, I guess. I think it's right.
Well, in terms of the board order, you're.
Yes, that's what she's looking at.
Is it all there? Okay, then I'm prepared to move approval.
Oh, we have to do public comment real quick.
And excuse me, I wanted to mention that our lessee, Grace Stevens of SCP Conservation is, I think he's available to answer any questions as well. He wasn't planning to make a statement, but if you have questions, he's available.
Any further questions from commissioners regarding this agenda item? I don't see any. I don't see any. We'll open it up to public comment. I don't see any in the room. Nick, is there anyone online?
Members of the public, if you'd like to address the board with comments, use your raise hand feature and we'll let you do that. I don't have any hands raised.
Okay, let's close the comment period. And Commissioner Heath, I believe you might have a motion for us.
I move the board approval of Ecosystem Services lease ES 114741 and RAP 114740 as contained in our packet and in Morgan County.
We have a motion from Commissioner Heath. Is there a second?
Commissioner Chavez, I second.
Commissioner Chavez seconds. We will call a roll vote. Commissioner Clark,
Aye.
Commissioner Heath,
Aye.
Commissioner Chavez,
Yes.
and the chair votes yes. That motion passes 4-0. All right, we're still with Mindy. Our next item. Yep, another ecosystem services production lease.
Yes. It's my pleasure to present the St. Vrain Wetland Mitigation Bank production lease, ecosystem services lease, ES 114743, and the road access permit is 114745. This project has the potential to earn 1.2 million for the state land board and to restore 40 acres of wetland. This is called land along the St. Vrain Creek. The St. Vrain Wetland Mitigation Bank is located in southwestern Weld County. Regionally, it's located about 30 miles north of the city of Denver and 5 miles east of the city of Longmont. It's located, this is I-25 running north and south. It's located immediately adjacent to I-25. And this property is actually located and operated and managed within part of St. Vrain State Park. It's this piece of state trust land, which is outlined in blue. We call the Bacon property. We purchased it at the request of Colorado Parks and Wildlife in 2006. It was for sale by a local farmer, and it's now been managed kind of mostly as an open space and buffer area to the rest of the park. This park is really characterized by these large ponds that were former gravel ponds. And it's mostly camping, RV camping, and fishing. The St. Vrain River Road flows from west to east through the property and through these ponds during periods of high flood. Most of the ponds flood. And the mitigation bank will be occupied by the area that's shown in kind of a rust color orange. You can see that it includes land not only within the state trust land property, but also within CPW owned land. As we were looking to how to do the due diligence and how the bank might functionally operate, we approached CPW because we especially needed this piece of land, the long skinny piece of land to the west of our property, but we actually offered to them any other lands you'd also like to include in the mitigation bank, and they included this large area here. So today, the project actually involves 70 acres of state trust land and 80 acres of CPW land. My presentation today will only deal with the land at the State Land Board. Our lessee is negotiating separately and using very similar documents with CPW. But your action today will only be for the state trust. The project size on state trust land will be 70 acres. It will involve the restoration of 40 acres of wetlands. It also, similar to that, I'll be showing you some photographs, also has a bluff that will serve as a buffer. This property is in the Internal Improvements Trust. So even the revenue that comes into the State Land Board, that revenue will then go but flow back to CPW under our agreement with, because the land is assigned to the Internal Improvements Trust. It will generate about 90 acres, 90 wetland credits. Most of those will actually be generated on CPW owned land, but 40 of those will be on State Land Board land. And the amount of revenue coming in just for the State Land Board, we've estimated at $1.2 million upon the completion of the project. And that would average out to be about a little over $17,000 an acre. I also have another little video showing the aerial slide. This is courtesy of Abe. I don't see a little story. This is about a minute long. We're standing on the bluff, or Abe is standing on the bluff, and he's flying the drone south. This is the main part of the wetland project on State Land Board land. You can see an existing pond, but most of the land around this existing pond is kind of upland and is not functioning as a wetland. We're now flying west, where you see the mountains in the distance. Most of this area here, lands will be, some surface land will be removed, and we'll be recreating the wetlands that way. This is the St. Vrain Creek flowing on the left-hand side of the photograph of the video. This will now pan to the north, and you'll be able to see the bluff. This is a remnant wetland along an old oxbow, but as Abe pans north, you'll see this bluff. These lands, for the most part, except for that buffer, will not be included in the wetland bank. This little ranch house and barn is where CPW owns that, and one of the park managers lives. That road to the right is the road access permit that provide access to the site. Again, this land here is most of CPW's land where the St. Vrain Creek flows through. That was the piece that was so important to us to have included in the wetland project. And then we'll be turning and coming back, looking east. And I-25 is just in the distance. If the room were dark, you could probably see the cars moving along I-25. Are there any questions about the property? Okay, the site conditions include some large fields that have been fallow. You can see invasive Russian olive trees here. This one in the distance is part of CPW's land that will be included in the project. Part of that land includes this large pond that has mostly been taken over with cattails. That'll be restored as well. This shows a project map of the site. Again, this Colorado, the state trust land is located on the eastern part of this project zone. And the CPW owned land is outlined in red. The road access permit will be coming through this land owned by CPW and through our own state trust land. And the enhancement plan will involve grading the soil surface to restore and reconnect the wetland hydrology on site on that large floodplain that I showed you. Reducing the berm that exists along the river now to allow seasonal hydrology, flooding, increase the bottom elevation of some of the ponds to recreate and take it away from being a pond, a standing pond, to actually having appropriate hydrology for diverse wetlands. Removing the cattails and other invasive species. One of the terms of the mitigation bank proposal is also removing unrestricted livestock grazing. Even though that's not currently a use, it is a use allowed by law and allowed within our land. So that will be removed and credits will be awarded for that as well. And then finally, planting diverse native vegetation. Any questions about any of these project characteristics? Okay. This non-compete area is actually, the project is located in the St. Vrain Buckgate watershed. Not all of the St. Vrain watershed is included because of the Army Corps requirement that it stop at an eco-region line. So but we do have the eastern part of it where most of the development is occurring and where most of the credits will be sold. And again, this larger area outlined in red is also a secondary service area upon where credits can be sold. Our lease terms are very similar, almost identical to the ones we just reviewed before. $5,000 annual ground rent upon approval by the Corps of Engineers. 20% share of gross credit sales. Here, the advance minimum distribution, we've set that value at $75,000. Even with the sale of just 2 credits, we think we'll be making that value back. We probably will never need to implement that. But should we need to do that would be $15,000 starting in year 4 and running for 5 years. The non-compete area is the St. Vrain Puckett watershed. There's a 15-year primary lease term for the ecosystem services production lease and a similar 15-year period for the road access. With that, staff recommends the board approve ecosystem services lease 114743 and the road access permit 114745 with SCP conservation. And again, Grove Stevens is available.
All right, any questions, comments from commissioners? I don't see any. We will open it up to public comment. If there's any members of the public who would like to speak at this time.
Folks in the public, if you'd like to speak, use that raise hand feature and we'll bring you up. I don't have any hands at this time.
Okay. Mindy has put forward a board order for us, both online or on the screen and in our packet. And we will need a motion.
Commissioner Chavez, I move we approve Ecosystem Services Lease ES 114743 and RAP 114745 as described in the board package.
Second.
We have a motion from Commissioner Chavez and the second Commissioner Clark. We will call a vote. Commissioner Clark.
Aye.
Commissioner Heath. Commissioner Chavez.
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. That motion passes 4-0. Thank you, Mindy Gottsigan.
When they kill the cattails, let me know how they do it. I'm really curious.
We are going to move on to our next item C, tab 9. We're going to hear from Ben Teschner related to a solid minerals lease in Cheyenne County.
All right. Good morning, still morning, commissioners. This is Ben Teschner for the record, solid minerals manager. I'm on the line here also. I believe we have Jody Schreiber representing the applicant, ANS Construction, which is a subsidiary of RE Corporation, which includes Fremont Paving, who's a fairly large lessee of ours in the sand and gravel space, not just here, but on other projects, including many down in Pueblo and El Paso counties. This is a photo of the property in question, and you can see there's a couple things to just kind of point out about this picture. This property does have a wind lease on it in addition to a grazing lease, although there is only one tower on it at the moment. But you can see sort of the towers that are part of this project off in the distance, are part of the larger wind project that are not located on Citrus, but that's an important context. So this is a fun gravel pit, and from my perspective, because they're all fun, right?
They're all fun.
But we get to support the highway resurfacing of US 385 in East Central Colorado. And so what's a little bit unique about this particular lease or this particular project is that this would be a built for purpose gravel mine that is specifically for this resurfacing project. It'll be mined over the course of a few weeks, maybe a couple months, then closed and reclaimed. So we're talking about a very, very brief window of disturbance prior to going back to reclamation. The lease is located in northern Cheyenne County, a little north of Cheyenne Wells. And this is the, if you're keeping track at home, this is the lesser seen minerals map in orange, so that's why there's a little more property shown here. We zoom in on this part of the state, on the east side over here. This is, I believe, Kansas, and then the property in question is right here, just south of the Cheyenne and what's the county? It's Kit Carson, I believe. Kit Carson County border. And the highway that would be redone is this one right here. So you can see why this makes sense to pull gravel from this property if you're doing a construction project on this stretch of highway. Zoomed in a little further, this is again the property, and here's the highway again, immediately abutting the state trust land parcel. The wind turbine that is on the parcel is located right here, and is not in the path of proposed disturbance. So when staff was considering this lease, we consulted with a number of parties. The grazing lessee has been, we sent a letter to the grazing lessee. They've also spoken to the applicant, ANS Construction, and been in direct contact with them. And the grazing lessee has expressed support for cohabitating these uses. There is a renewable energy lease, as I said, on the property. And again, the applicant, ANS Construction, has spoken with the wind lessee, and believe that there's no conflict of these uses. Cheyenne County confirmed to staff that this area is zoned appropriately for this use and that they would await a conditional use permit for this use as well. And this property is in our Lesser Prairie Chicken Stewardship Action Plan area, and is in the, Mindy, what's the category?
It's the estimated occupied.
Yeah. Okay, great. The estimated occupied range, which is, as Mindy said, the least important. But that categorization limits the solid minerals disturbance to 40 acres or less. And it requires that raptor perch deterrents being installed on permanent structures, and that there are special seed mix requirements for reclamation. All of these are included in the lease document. Financials, this would be a $5 per acre or $3,200 a year in rent. A royalty of 63 cents a ton, which is the going rate for this part of the state, and an advanced minimum royalty of $10,000, regardless of how much is produced there. This results in a minimum revenue, even if nothing is produced off of this property and nothing gets permitted, of $13,200. And staff is estimating, based on ANS's estimates of how much material will be needed for this project, of an upside of approximately $27,000. So that's a fairly modest amount, but again, we're talking about a really short project here, a matter of weeks, maybe months reclamation. So staff is recommending that the board approve this lease 114,799 with ANS Construction. And here's the board order for your consideration.
Thank you, Ben. Do we have any questions or comments from the commissioners? I do not see any. Let's go ahead and see if there's any public comment, Nick.
Members of the public, if you'd like to make a comment, use the raise hand feature. I don't have any hands, Commissioner.
Okay. We will need a motion. In our packet, we have a, it is Cheyenne County, but it's listed as Urbana County, Urfanu County.
That's my mistake.
Change the board order.
We're just going to change the board order.
I'm sorry about that.
Yep, no worries.
That's unusual for you.
Nate, that slipped through 3 levels of edits, so thank you for catching it.
Put that in. Is it in here or just in the board?
Look,
It's in the book, but we are on the same page with you in Cheyenne County.
Huerfano County is a very different place.
Yes, exactly. All right, with that, do we have a motion? Don't all speak up at once.
I'll jump in there then. I move to approve solid minerals lease 114799 in Cheyenne County as otherwise presented in our packet.
It's Huerfano, right?
No, it's Cheyenne.
No, that's the mistake. No, it's a mistake.
Oh, I didn't hear that part. Okay.
Yes, exact, no worries. And do we have a second? Motion from Commissioner Clark. Is there a second?
There's a second.
Second, Commissioner Heath. We will call a vote. Commissioner Clark,
Aye.
Commissioner Heath,
Aye.
Commissioner Chavez,
Yes.
and the chair votes yes. That motion passes 4-0.
Thank you very much, Commissioners. And the next time you drive Highway 385,
We will thank you again.
remember this is state gravel.
All right, thank you. Nick, are you going to walk us through the board leasing agenda?
Yep. And I'm gonna do it from right here.
Perfect.
Middle of the day.
Perfect.
For the record, this is Assistant Director Nick Massey, presenting the board leasing agenda on behalf of Andy Bissett, Transactions and Record Services Manager. Commissioners, in your packet, you've got details on 12 transactions comprised of 5 competitive bids and 7 new leases. I just wanted to make a couple of notes and try not to pull myself into asking or fielding any questions about the details, but I think as a testament to the effectiveness of the competitive bid process, we've seen some nice increases on the rent amounts for some of these parcels. And so we're always excited to see those on the agenda. And then I also wanted to point out that on page, I forget what page it is in the board packet, I printed mine out separate. There's a trio of road access permits that are related to Mindy's work that, as you saw today, we asked for your approval for a lease as well as the road access permit in tandem. And these were just ones that were not requested a couple of years ago. So it's a bit of a cleanup. But moving forward, they will be one and the same in the request for the lease itself. So I will do my best to answer any questions that come up, but if there, I'll leave it to you, commissioners.
Are there any questions, comments from commissioners?
Comment, Commissioner Heath. I just wanted to mention that there's one of these leases is in Grand County. So just for your information.
Thank you. I see no further questions here, Nick. Let's open up public comment.
Members of the public, feel free to use that raise hand feature if you'd like to address the board on this. And I don't have any hands raised, Commissioner.
All right, thank you. With that, we will need a motion.
Commissioner Heath, I move the board support board leasing agenda for August 2022 and as existing in our board packet.
Thank you, Commissioner Heath. Is there a second?
Second.
Mr. Chavez seconds. With that, we'll call a vote. Commissioner Clark,
Aye.
Commissioner Heath,
Aye.
Commissioner Chavez,
Yes.
and the chair votes yes, that motion passes 4-0. All right. We're moving right along. We are to board officer elections. And I have been chatting with Director Ryan and I've been the chair for a year and obviously still learning Mindy's name, but I would appreciate signing up for another year. We have talked about the work of the treasurer's office that I'm also involved in with the investment board, but it directly impacts and relates to our work. So I think it would be a nice continuum for me to share that responsibility with you, but wanted to open it up to my fellow commissioners in any discussion.
I think we had talked about that last meeting, about continuing.
Yeah.
And I mean, from my perspective, yeah, I keep things as they are.
I agree. I'd be happy to put your name in nomination.
And I agree as well. This is Commissioner Clark, and we're grateful for your leadership, Commissioner Scanlon, Chair Scanlon, and look forward to more.
I would say this is all of us who share the leadership of this board. But I appreciate the work I get to do with Bill Ryan and the staff. And it's really important that the team that supports us allows us to do what we do. So I want to acknowledge that.
Officially or just?
Need a vote.
Kind of-
Okay.
I'd like to place a nomination for the board chair in the name of Christine Scanlon.
Motion from Commissioner Heath.
I'll second it. Does that include is there a vice president too, or what officers do we actually have?
That is a
What
great
statute
question.
requires to do?
All the
We
same.
have a vice chair that is currently Commissioner Heath. We should probably do that at the same time. I just didn't know if that needed the same officialness as the board chair. Statute speaks to chair.
Yeah, the statute doesn't really discuss elections, but your governance. So yes, but you should do that separately by a separate vote. I suppose you could do it as a slate, but.
Well, we have an answer that allows us to do wherever we would like.
Exactly.
Okay, I've got it. I've been,
But we already have a motion, so I'll second it.
okay. All right, motion, Commissioner Heath, second, Commissioner Chavez. Let's call a vote. Commissioner Clark,
Aye.
Commissioner Heath,
Aye.
Commissioner Chavez, and the chair votes yes, and I thank each of you for supporting me.
We're very grateful for your leadership and the time you put into this. Thank you.
All right, should we do vice chair while we're at it?
Sure.
Okay.
Aaron, are you good with Josie continuing?
Or let me
Yes.
just be open and say I'm totally open. to
Yeah,
anyone
Josie, you
else
good
who
with
might wanna do this.
So I move we, Josie is the vice chair or continue with the.
Continues. And I just need to compliment Josie and thank her. She's had to fill in for me twice with COVID and unexpected family issues. So it's been awesome having you do that. So I personally really appreciate you in that role too. We have a motion, Commissioner Chavez.
Second.
Second, Commissioner Clark. We will call a vote. Commissioner Clark,
Aye.
Commissioner Heath,
Aye.
Commissioner Chavez, and the chair votes yes. That motion passes 4-0. We will continue forward one more year. Okay.
Elections. Years have ever been involved in.
Because you've done such a good job.
No fundraising.
Exactly, none of that, yeah. Do any of the commissioners have any comments on the minutes from our last meeting or changes to suggest? I do not see any. We will approve the minutes by acclamation. And the only other thing Bill and I wanted to talk about, we both have a conflict. Why don't you set up the stage for
So let's
October?
spend a few minutes to talk about the coming months of board meetings. September, I should have pulled up a calendar, but
I
the dates
am
are
right
the Thursday and Friday, not the Wednesday and Thursday. Rachel, I believe that you've made the changes in everybody's calendar. The plan remains to be in El Paso County. We need to tour a number of land board properties that are adjacent to military bases. And we'll be doing that with some folks from the Nature Conservancy, from the Trust for Public Land, and from the military. And the idea of the tour is to get eyes on the assets before an October vote about whether or not we want to put these properties into play in the REPI program. REPI, as you'll recall, is funding to create buffers around military bases so that there's not encroachment and they can continue to perform their mission. So September will be that tour. October then will be what looks to me to be a brief meeting now. We need to have a vote on the REPI participation. So again, we'll have the workshop in September, the vote in October. That gives you all the opportunity as we're out touring in September to ask for more detail about certain things, to anything you need staff to prepare for you in advance of the vote. We'll have time to do that. But the rest of the October agenda looks fairly short. And I would like to propose two things. One, I think we can do it by Zoom, so nobody needs to drive or go anywhere. And second, both Christine and I will be traveling in October when the board meeting is. So we could, since we only need a couple of hours, we could move that a week in advance. Will that work for the staff team? That was Commissioner Scanlon's suggestion yesterday. Or we could hold it on the date we've got now, although there would only be possibly 3 commissioners.
We aren't sure if we'll have another Scott's seat filled. So we really need all of us. I'll be in Europe. I could potentially call in on Zoom at whatever hour it is there, but given that it's such a short meeting, we're wondering if we could just have some flexibility and move it earlier.
What is that date in October currently?
Currently, it is, we are holding the 12th and 13th. We obviously don't need that.
Right, so that's, I don't even have it on my calendar because I already cannot do that week. So it'd be better to move because in the Housing Colorado conferences, so I would be missing them anyway.
Send you the notice and you just declined, or did we not send you a notice? So I'm just trying to do housekeeping.
That's one that, because I always know about that a year in advance. So I think that's one that I had already noted.
That you can do.
Okay.
So are we required to meet monthly?
So, yes, the
Okay.
statute requires us to meet monthly. What it doesn't do is define meeting. And
Okay.
so I think you could certainly call a meeting to order, ask for public comment over Zoom, take care of any business we had and adjourn in an hour if that was all we needed. There's no. Okay, but just
But do
from
we
a
want to-
practical matter, the term meeting is not defined. Now,
No, I'm just saying, we do need to do the REPI piece of business in October.
Okay, that's what I thought you meant. Okay. So given that now there seems to be a scheduling problem, I'm just wondering if we can look at calendars for either the 4th or 5th of October. I fly out the 6th.
I think I'm in Mexico on that week.
Wednesday the 5th.
I think, yes, September 29th through the 6th or 7th or something like that. I mean, again, we can zoom in. I think they still have internet there. I'm guessing. I don't know.
We're hoping.
In there, so I
I
don't
mean,
know.
does it really matter? Oh, we have to do it every month? So do we have to
Again,
be in October or can we do 2 in September?
You need, not a question that has either been asked or litigated very often. I think you should need to meet in the calendar month of October.
Can we do it the week later or this?
Do it the Wednesday the 19th or Thursday the 20th.
I could do, the 18th would be better for me. The 19th is my board meeting. I'll be in Washington, but that's easy for me to zoom in on the 18th if that works.
I'm good with that.
I am.
And
Yeah.
I can do that week. I will be zooming in from Hawaii, I think. But I can join remotely.
Well, I hate to have, honestly, I'd like people not to have to come in on their vacations. I sort of feel
So
like that
you
makes
have
some
that whole
sense.
week? Tuesday.
I will be working. I'm going with someone who's doing a conference. I'm working and then the vacation will be after that. So it's perfectly fine and much better for me to zoom in during that than during the conference I'm in the week.
Okay.
before.
All right.
So Tuesday, the 18th, I think is the date on the table. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
Is,
See, nodding head.
yes.
Nodding head.
18th is
Commissioner
fine, but let's
Brady.
work the time change with Erin, so she's not trying to join at 4 a.m. or something.
-6, could we do noon?
I think it's only 4.
Noon is it?
Will that work for you? Noon on the
Noon.
18th? Yeah.
Works for me. Although I handily keep Hawaii on my,
And I know I got the email, but it's not on my phone. For September, that's the 15th and 16th. Is that correct? Okay. Okay, perfect. Yep.
we're going down Wednesday night. Is that right? Yeah. Okay.
And for September, I will be, just like this month, I will now be able to only join the business meeting. That will be on that Friday, correct? The 16th?
Yes, you're not able to join for the tour of the Repi properties on Thursday?
Unfortunately, yes. I now have to be in DC on the 14th and 15th.
You guys will have to decide. You're gonna decide whether or not to dispose of 100,000 acres of state trust land. I would feel better if you had seen it.
Understood.
Why don't we see if we can work calendars? I have some flexibility. You know, I don't know, Rachel, if there's a way
Well,
to
the,
pull us. Oh, but we have a lot of
we
people.
did all this because of the
Military
military.
is, it's not us. It's not us. I get it. I get it. Well, I think we are where we are.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it'll be a full day on Thursday.
Yes.
So
it
go-
will. We'll
go
go down on Wednesday night.
Wednesday night, the 14th, full day, the 15th, and then I'm guessing another kind of half
A
day,
half-day shortish meeting on Friday, the 16th.
16th. Okay. All right. Whoa, that was far more challenging than thought, but thank you. I really appreciate it. It sounds like we really needed to move that meeting. So with that, I believe, unless anyone has anything else to raise with us or share, let's go ahead and call this meeting adjourned. I'm gonna start doing this. Yeah. Y'all follow it around.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Safe travels back home.
Thanks, Erin.
Thanks, Aaron.